Hello, dear participants. Before we begin, let's make sure that everyone has selected their language correctly, because we will have two languages today at our webinar.
Before we start, let's make sure that everybody has chosen the comfortable language channel, as we are having a bilingual event today. Отже, я попрошу вас знайти іконку глобус.
Please select the globe icon in the bottom of your screen and select English or Ukrainian.
Icon in the right corner in the bottom of your screen, press it and choose English or Ukrainian. Отже, я сподіваюся, що всі обрали.
I hope that everyone has selected their language. And now, dear esteemed panelists, participants, we are glad to welcome you at our today's webinar on quantitative and qualitative improvements in the numbers of stateless persons, which is co-organized by the State Statistics Service and also UNHCR, UN Refugee Agency. And the key principle in the agenda is to keep no one aside. And it is especially important to take care of the vulnerable population groups who are isolated, marginalized, who are not having the benefit of basic human rights. And there should be the foundation for decision-making and policy-making about such vulnerable groups, such as stateless persons. So today we will look into the global and national perspective, the scope of this problem, and also the possible methods for the improvement of data collection in order to follow the principle of keeping no one aside. So I would like to give the floor to Deputy Secretary of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, Mr. Anatoly Kotsevol, who is taking care of the strategic development goals. The floor is yours. Thank you, Elena.
Lincoln. It's my pleasure to open this event together with you. It's a big honor, and I do believe that this is one of the biggest importance which we have these days to discuss these issues. Sorry, I will turn into Ukrainian to the larger audiences, but we have interpretation.
So, ladies and gentlemen, hello once again. The representatives of UNHCR, representatives of the State Statistics Service, international experts, also representatives of government institutions, non-governmental organizations. It's a pleasure to take part in our today's webinar on the improvement of quantitative and qualitative data on stateless persons. That's a highly important topic because Ukraine has taken on some responsibilities concerning the strategic development goals. We intend to keep no one aside, and this is the motto of our today's event. This is what we are discussing. The very essence of this process of implementing the strategic development goal, that's a complex process. It implies participation of many actors, not only the government, but also civil society organizations and citizens in general. The more they understand that any policy is impossible without active engagement, the better it is. But Also, I would like to express gratitude to our international partners, UN agencies, especially UNHCR, for their support in the monitoring of persons without citizenship who, because of their status, cannot ensure human rights for themselves. And also because of COVID-19, we are speaking of that online, and this is another factor that contributes to the limitation of human rights, and it further limited the human rights in Ukraine and in other countries, although there are ways out. So the principle to keep no one aside is surely including stateless persons, especially speaking of goals number 5 and 10. The first one being about the discrimination against girls and women, and the 10th one about any kind of discrimination in the society. So this is something we should keep in mind when assessing the effectiveness of other strategic development goals and their implementation. Of course, everything is included there, but in our specific issue, there are some criteria that we can use for the control of implementation of this goal. And also, there is a goal of sustainable economic development. And in this regard, the government also has 3 different areas of work. First, the inclusion of SDG into regional and national strategic planning. And right now, strategic development goals are included in every strategic document. The second element is funding, because without funding, nothing is possible. And we are thinking of integrated funding approaches. And this, we hope, will include stateless persons as well. And one more element here is the result-based management system, which is being launched by the government. So this will be a system which will enable checking whether some task is contributing to the accomplishment of a strategic development goal, including the ones that have to do with stateless persons. Also, I would like to point out that last year's law of Ukraine and also the resolution concerning its implementation, they enable a number of human rights improvement. Although we know that the implementation of any legislation act is crucial, and here we need to have collaboration with civil society organizations, but also with the State Statistics Service. And we are hearing of the future population census that would also contribute to identification of stateless persons. There are also other areas of work related to these people, and the more statistical data we have, the better the results are. So once again, we are very grateful to our colleagues in the UN and also in the State Statistics Service. You are doing a very important work here. And also I wish everyone a fruitful discussion here, developing the best approaches to work. And I can assure you that there is the support of this issue, including support from the president, for whom it is the priority. So I wish everyone good health and have a nice discussion. Thank you, Anatoly. And now I would like to give the floor to Her Excellency Karolina Lincoln-Billing, representative of UNHCR in Ukraine and a representative of the agency that took on the global plan on overcoming the situation with stateless persons. So for many years, UNHCR has been busy with the successful implementation of this plan. So the floor is yours.
There. Thank you very much, Olena, and good morning, dear colleagues. And thank you so much, Your Excellency Anatoly Kotsevo, for the warm introduction. And I would also really like to thank the State Statistical Service of Ukraine, Mr. Werner and Olena, of course, we work very closely with, because you were saying, Olena, now that you congratulated UNHCR on the successful implementation of the action plan, but it's really the government of Ukraine and the institutions that should be congratulated. And UNHCR is very, very proud to be a partner with you in these efforts aimed at preventing and reducing statelessness in Ukraine, and efforts to identify people who are undocumented and who could therefore be at risk of statelessness. So it's really teamwork and collaboration. And again, we're very proud because a lot of amazing progress has been made in Ukraine over the past years. Ukraine acceded to the 2 statelessness conventions in 2013, and this year a statelessness determination procedure was established. And these are just a few of the milestones that have been achieved and that UNHCR is promoting globally in order to inspire other countries to follow the practice of Ukraine. Maybe I would like to start with a few words about UNHCR's role in this area, because usually we are best known for our mandate to provide protection and help find durable solutions for people who are forcibly displaced due to conflict and persecution. But we also have a mandate from the General Assembly to provide protection to stateless persons and to prevent and reduce statelessness. And that mandate has been detailed in a series of resolutions from the UN General Assembly since 1995. And within this mandate, we work in 4 key areas. That is the identification of people who are stateless or at risk of being stateless, the prevention of statelessness, reduction of statelessness, and protection of the rights of stateless people. So it's within this framework that we are very proud to co-organize this webinar with you today, this morning. I think there are a few slides that I would like to show at the beginning of my presentation, just to kind of set the scene on what is statelessness and what are the key actions in this global action plan. I don't know if colleagues are sharing them. Olena? Okay, let me start giving the overview. Yes, here we have. So what is statelessness? Just as an introduction, there is in Article 1 of the 1954 Convention relating to the status of stateless person, a stateless person is defined as someone who is not considered as a national by any state under the operation of its law. And this is then there are some, they are distinct, of course, then from refugees or internally displaced persons and also from undocumented persons, because not having an identity paper or not having a legal residence permit in the country does not per se make a person stateless, but such persons could be at risk of statelessness. And this is why we will this morning also refer to people who are undocumented or who have undetermined or undefined nationality. In terms of the consequences of statelessness and the theme of this webinar today, which is leaving no one behind, I mean, that's a kind of key message of this webinar. Stateless persons or persons who are not able to identify themselves often lack access to socioeconomic rights. So it can lead to exclusion from education, from legal employment, from public health care, the right to open a bank account or rent or own a property. These are common consequences of statelessness. It also leads to lack of civil and political rights, like exclusion from voting and political participation, and lack of legal recourse through the judicial and administrative system. And it can also lead to detention because people cannot prove their identity and their right to actually stay in the country. We also know from decades of working on this issue across the world that stateless people often face increased vulnerabilities to sexual and other forms of exploitation and abuse, including economic exploitation, again, because they cannot prove their identity, their right to stay, and they live in the kind of shadows of the society, in the margins of the society, where without always access to law enforcement and judicial recourse. We also know from our experience of working that it can lead to marginalization of communities where people who are stateless or undocumented and at risk of stateless lack this feeling of belonging to the state because they do not have the papers to prove their right to live in the country and their right to access education, the right to access healthcare or right to access social protection. They end up in the margins and exclusion from the society, and therefore their feeling of belonging to the society is weakened and challenged. And this is why UNHCR adopted and launched a global campaign to end statelessness in 2014. And that campaign was accompanied with an action plan to end statelessness by 2024. So it was an ambitious goal to end statelessness in this 10-year period. And the 10 actions that are kind of part of the action plan are listed here. I will not read all of them, but for example, action 2 is to ensure that no child is born stateless, and it was mentioned in the introduction by the Deputy State Secretary the importance of birth registration, for example, because if a child is born and does not have her or his birth registered, that person may have difficulties later obtaining an ID document, a passport, and their nationality to the state. Another one of the actions, number 10, is to improve quantitative and qualitative data on stateless populations or populations who may be at risk of statelessness. And we see similar references in the Sustainable Development Goals that are linked to the importance of data and also of preventing and resolving statelessness. And this Action 10 was included because there is a strong recognition that without proper data on the number of people who are stateless or at risk of statelessness and what is their profile and background, it's very, very difficult to adopt policies and procedures aimed at preventing and ending and reducing statelessness. So that's why today is such an important webinar, to come together and see how we collectively together can work on improving the data we have to inform our policies and programs. So if I go to the next slide, please. This lists the sustainable development goals and indicators of relevance. So SDG goal 16.9 provides that by 2030, states should provide a legal identity for all, including birth registration. And the indicator in terms of progress to measure is the proportion of children under 5 years of age whose births have been registered with a civil authority. Another indicator is in the SDGs is the proportion of countries that have conducted at least one population and housing census in the last 10 years and have achieved 100% birth registration and 80% death registration. And the issue of census is something that we will be discussing in more detail, because as Ukraine is preparing to launch a census in the coming years, we are recommending the inclusion of one question that could help capture and identify people who are living in Ukraine, but who are stateless or at risk of being stateless because they are undocumented, because that can then help inform policies and procedures going forward. So just to end my introduction, again, we're extremely proud and grateful for the cooperation with the Ukrainian government, the Cabinet of Ministers, the government as a whole, and the State Statistical Service, with whom we worked for many years on this issue, because it's only by working together and bringing the information and experiences we have from our different mandates and perspectives together that we can really achieve policies and procedures that can prevent and reduce statelessness and help Ukraine achieve the goal of ending statelessness by 2024, as set out in the campaign and global action plan. So thank you very much, and looking forward to an interactive discussion.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your presentation, for the introductory words that you've made, for the greeting words that you've made, and for all the support and the fruitful work that we've been having over this period of time. And it's a great pleasure of being enjoying working with you all through this cooperation that we've been having for several years now. And in 2019, in Bangkok, Thailand, there was a global group gathering to discuss the potential development of international recommendations on statistics for the stateless people. In the work, there participated the representatives of many statistic offices and ministries, in particular 16 European countries, Asian and African countries participate there, and the UNHCR also participated, and the regional commissions of the UN also participated. The State Statistics Service of Ukraine also participated, and later on, EGRIS, the Special Statistic Group on the IDPs and refugees, and the Statistics Service is a part of the steering committee of that group. So it's a great pleasure of mine that I give the microphone to the head of the head of State Statistics Service, Mr. Werner. Thank you very much, Thank you very much, dear colleagues. It's a great pleasure of mine to be greeting you here. And first and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to Anatoly Kutsavoy for this great attention that you've been given to the matters and the issues that we're discussing. I'd like to express my gratitude to our partner, the representatives of the UNHCR, Ms. Carolina Lindholm-Billing, for your great cooperation, for the great cooperation that we've been having, and for the fact that we're here today and we're sharing our experience and we're discussing this ideas of this great webinar, which is dedicated to not just, not leave anyone behind, but to retain the human rights and protect the human rights. And the stateless people are very vulnerable people. And this is what Ms. Carolina has said. This is what Anatoly has said today. That these are the people, stateless people, are the people who are deprived of the basic rights, basic human rights, and they do not belong to any state. They cannot do anything in this life, and this is nonsense. That in the 21st century we still have people of the kind living, existing, and from the part of the State Statistics Service of Ukraine, definitely our mandate is we've got to run the census in Ukraine, and we've heard about this today, about the census that is to happen in the several years to come. And I would like to say that the census, all Ukrainian census program, means that we're going to be talking about citizenship in that census. And I'd like to express my gratitude to our colleague Carolina, that in our previous meeting we managed to find yet another way to improve the issue in order to better define that pool of people who are stateless. And I hope that once the census is over and the government wants it to happen in 2023, we will finally be able to have more precise information as to the stateless people, their number, and more information about them. This will help us to first understand better where those people live, and we'll be able to shape up the policy the right way, the policy that will definitely be based on the data. I'm talking about the number of people, of stateless people dwelling in Ukraine. A very important issue is that the war has been going on for 7 years in the east of Ukraine, and we see that over this period of time, a lot of children have been born, which are unfortunately, we don't know anything about them. If they are registered as Ukrainian citizens. And this is a purely political issue, and the consequences of which we will have to be coping with for years to come. This is a tough issue, and I hope that today we will also touch upon this issue, and we will at least try to look for the way out to know the number of those unregistered children, and to figure out how we can help those small children who've been unable to, in fact, be able to be registered as the Ukrainian citizens, but they are Ukrainian citizens. And because they were born, because they're linked to Ukraine, were born in the territory of Ukraine, and this is the toughest of the issues to be resolved. And today's webinar is, I guess, is meant to, number one, for us to share ideas with regards of practices, probably the best practices. Probably we'll find more solutions and be able to improve the policy in the field of detecting of stateless people and providing them with assistance. That's it from my side, and that's it from my short introductory speech. And I would like to wish us good and fruitful discussion for today, and best of luck to all of us. And just like Anatoly has said, today is a very important issue. A very important issue is health. So good health to all of us. Thank you. Thank you, Igor. and let's go on. And I suggest that we go over to the panel discussions. And it's a great pleasure of mine that I give the microphone to Natalia Krinsky-Bal, coordinator of the EGRIS, the expert group on the statistics, to tell us about what the future holds in store, what there's going on, what activities are there with regards of this very topic on the global level. And I would also like to remind us that this expert group has got some good experience in development of recommendations that have been approved of and that some countries already use. I'm talking about the international recommendations on the refugees and those of the IDPs. And currently there's developed the international recommendations on the stateless people. So the mic is yours, Miss Natalia.
Thank you very much. I hope I can be heard well. At least I hope the translators can hear me well. Unfortunately, I will need to continue my presentation in English. I'm just going to share a few slides to support the presentation. Please let me know if you can see them. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thanks.
Fantastic. Okay, well, many thanks to the workshop organizers, and the different participants who have joined today, and my esteemed panelists. It's been a pleasure to hear the opening remarks from the previous speakers, and I look forward to hearing the more in-depth presentations from those that will follow. I've been asked to focus a little bit on bringing the global perspective and build on the few comments that Olena has already mentioned around the development of international recommendations on the production and statistics for stateless persons. So I'm going to do that with just a short intervention on four main points. Firstly, I wanted to paint the picture of the global data gap and elaborate some of the specific challenges that are commonly associated with statelessness. Maybe many are relevant in the context of Ukraine, but these are very much kind of global challenges. So I'm not speaking specifically about the Ukrainian context in this point. Secondly, I will speak a little bit about the progress we have made so far in developing international recommendations on statelessness statistics. Focus a little bit on the content. I say the expected content because this is in progress at the moment. We expect to have this finalized by 2023. And then I wanted to take a few minutes at the end to speak more specifically about Census, knowing, of course, that there's an upcoming opportunity in Ukraine that's already been mentioned by Carolina and others. So first of all, the global data gap, and these are some really stark figures that are there on the screen before you. And really the key message to share here is when UNHCR fulfills one part of its mandate on statelessness, which is putting together the global statistics on this population, there are huge differences between the known stateless population globally, the 4.2 million that are reported, between the estimates, which range from 10 million and up to 1.1 billion of stateless or populations at risk of statelessness. So as you can see, this is a huge stark difference between the figures that are reported, and that becomes very complicated when you start to dive down into the details and have a look at the reasons behind this story. But of course, there are many reasons for this difference, and I'll elaborate on some of them in this next part of the presentation. First and foremost, a definitional issue. The definitions used, the statistical framework, and the appropriate kind of definitions and classifications for stateless populations, undocumented populations, and the like really differ from context to context. So it's very difficult, you say in English comparing apples and pears, or apples and oranges. I don't know if the expression translates so well into Ukrainian. I'm sure you have a similar one. But if you don't have this, the same definition, it's very difficult to compare the data from different contexts and from different data sources. So one key challenge that statelessness statistics really suffers from is the lack of a statistical framework, which implies different definitions are used in different contexts by different partners for different purposes, and of course various data quality issues that arise from this. There are a number of other more fundamental, is perhaps the appropriate word, methodological challenges that face those trying to collect data on this population, primarily linked to, the individual's awareness of their own stateless status, or their lack of willingness to come forward. We often speak about hidden populations and hard to reach populations. I would say that statelessness is a prime example of one of those. Stateless persons often live in precarious situations on the margins of society. This can add to the complexities when it comes to not only accessing the population, but also producing quality statistics. And we see, from taking the very global perspective here, we see quite a, unfortunately, still limited reporting, even from countries where there are known significant stateless populations. There's still limited official reporting. So all of these kind of challenges build on top of each other and help to create the global data gap that I presented on the previous slide. So one way to address this is to work on a project that I'm supporting in the secretariat function, but there are also a number of other partners involved to develop international recommendations on statelessness statistics. Why are we doing that? We're doing that to address some of those gaps, primarily to help improve the lives of affected populations through evidence-based policy. We heard from the opening remarks, several policy data needs mentioned from the Ukrainian context. That definitely translates to other contexts also. We heard also, we're aiming also with the recommendations once they're developed, and then looking forward to their implementation to improve, of course, the quality and comparability of national statistics that are produced. We're hoping to increase the capacity of countries, not only to produce the data, but to actually report on this data. And of course, there are appropriate linkages there with visibility within the SDG frameworks and other opportunities like that. And lastly, and I think quite critically, there is really significant momentum on this issue at the moment. So the reason we need the recommendations now is to really build on that momentum and that interest from countries, the Ukraine being one, but there are many others on that list who are asking for this framework and who are asking for this guidance. As part of the campaign that Carolina Billing mentioned earlier, there was midway through the campaign, there was a high-level segment on statelessness. Out of those different pledges from countries, around 38 pledges were specifically on improving national data on stateless populations. And out of those, 9 countries officially pledged to include statelessness in their census. So there is a call for more guidance. There is a call for these recommendations at this time. But we are very much in the middle of the process. We unfortunately don't yet have the recommendations to share with you to help with your census planning work. But I wanted to share with you here a little bit about the progress that we have made, starting off with the Bangkok meeting that Olena already mentioned. And I wanted just to share a little bit about the achievements so far. So as Elena mentioned, in 2019, an expert group meeting was held in Bangkok to discuss the need for and a potential shape of such a statistical framework. That group of 17 and now 18 different countries and a number of international organizations have continued that work in a very active and participatory way to shape a draft set of recommendations based on country experience and, of course, aligned to relevant legal frameworks. In 2020, in November 2020, this slightly informal group of interested parties then formalized their governance structure by being incorporated into the expert group on refugee and IDP statistics. which is a mandated expert group from the UN Statistical Commission that focuses on forced displacement. The steering committee there saw the synergies between the work and the real benefit of incorporating the work on statelessness under its umbrella. We are looking forward to the Commission upcoming in March 2022 to formalise the inclusion of statelessness in our terms of reference, but at the moment it's very much warmly welcomed by the partners. We will, as mentioned, there is a consolidated draft of the recommendation, but we will take the opportunity, unfortunately, due to the global pandemic and for a number of other reasons, there were some delays in the implementation. So we are planning now for the recommendations to be finalised by the end of 2022 for discussion in the March 2023 Statistical Commission. And we will therefore take the opportunity of the upcoming Commission in 2022, so in a few months from now, to discuss progress and to garner feedback from the international statistical community on that progress. The group taking part, and I starred Ukraine there, not only because that's relevant for this particular webinar, but also Ukraine has really been a star member of this group so far. We have 18 different countries who are actively working on the group and developing the recommendations alongside a number of international organizations that you can see on the screen here in front of you. So maybe some of you are familiar with international statistical recommendations and some of you less so. So I wanted just to take an opportunity to break it down a little bit further and elaborate what's actually inside the recommendations or what we're expecting to be in the final draft. First of all, there will be an analysis of the legal framework on statelessness. With of course, a view for that analysis to be, identifying how that can be translated into a statistical framework. Secondly, clear definitions for the purpose of statistical measurement will be outlined for stateless-related populations and persons of undetermined nationality. Thirdly, there will be a list of basic tabulations and indicators recommended for countries to produce. Fourthly, a discussion of data sources and recommendations of how key data sources that countries regularly use to produce official statistics can be adapted or enhanced to better include stateless populations. Fifthly, a look into the characteristics of stateless populations, recommended aspects, if you like, whether that be ethnicity, religion, gender. I don't want to predict the outcome, but some of the common aspects that might well appear here. Looking at the different characteristics of stateless populations and what can be most policy relevant to collect data on. And lastly, but definitely not least important, will be recommendations around statistical coordination for the production of these statistics. Let me take just a minute to elaborate on two pieces of that puzzle. First is the statistical framework, and as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, the statistical framework at the moment, as I said, it is under development at the moment, is looking at three main categories. So that would be stateless persons, a closely related but distinct population of persons who are of undetermined nationality. As was mentioned by previous speakers, this is a closely related population to those who are stateless, but not necessarily all of those people are stateless. Just because you can't prove your nationality or prove your citizenship of a country doesn't mean you don't have one. So that's a really important distinction and one where we're going to need to focus very carefully on data capture methods to ensure that they remain distinct populations. And thirdly, looking at stateless-related populations, so those people who might be living in the household of a stateless family, children of stateless parents, etc., etc. In terms of data sources, on the right-hand side of your screen, we will, the recommendations will, as I mentioned, rather than suggesting new data collection, we'll look at existing data sources and how those can be adapted. So it'll primarily look at some of the traditional and, if you like, foundational data sources that countries already make use of, looking at population census, looking at sample surveys, national sample surveys, looking at administrative data. But of course, because this is a hidden population and a difficult to reach population, it will also look at alternative methods, approaches to modeling, how data linking techniques can also enhance the production of statistics on stateless persons. Before I end then, I just wanted to take a few minutes to go into a little bit more detail on Census, and just maybe to point colleagues who might not already be aware of examples from other countries. There are a number of countries, I've named a few on the slide here, who have already in the previous census round included stateless populations in their census. So there are examples to look at. There's data to explore. There's perhaps discussions to be had, with those relevant governments about and statistical office about how useful that was, what their lessons learned might have been from those processes. There's growing momentum, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, linked to the high-level segment on statelessness, which saw 9 countries pledge to include statelessness in their census, and there's also work ongoing through UNHCR country offices in further countries. They weren't formal pledges, but there is work ongoing to include statelessness in the coming round of censuses. Some of this is in 2022, some in 2023, some in 2025, as the different countries are planning their work. And I think really importantly, what to focus on here is recommendations will very likely focus on, as I mentioned before, how to make use of the census questionnaire to better distinguish between stateless and those of undetermined nationality. That will be challenging, as there's always a competition for space in a very tightly packed census questionnaire, as I'm sure you all know very well. But I think it's really important to take a kind of a critical view of existing questions and maybe examples from other countries about how that can best be shaped, including not only what question is asked, but what answer options are provided for those who respond. Let me end there then by saying thank you very much for your attention, for the invitation and for your attention. And I'm looking forward to staying around for the rest of the webinar in case there are any questions that I can help answer. Thank you very much.
Щиро дякую, пані Наталія, за ваше надзвичайно...
Thank you so much, Natalia, for your in-depth and insightful presentation. It's indeed very useful to see the global perspective, the accomplishments that are already there, to see the best practices from abroad, so that we can borrow something that has worked for our other countries already. And also, since before 2023, we still have some time, we can also include some of the best practices in the actual work that will be done here. So, dear participants who are joining us on Facebook and through Zoom, please get ready with your questions in advance, because we will have our Q&A after the presentations by the panelists, and we will proceed with the national level now. We will look at the subject from the standpoint of national situation, but we will include the perspectives of international organizations, civil society organizations, and the citizens, and we will see how to develop the proper mechanisms and to work with those representatives of vulnerable groups. So I'm giving the floor to a representative of the State Migration Service, Ms. Olga Lysenko, who is working for the Department of Foreigners and Stateless Persons, and she will present us the implementation results of the convention. Olga, please. Hello, dear participants. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share the results of the State Migration Service in terms of recognition of stateless persons. As you may know, we are the central governmental authority responsible for the recognition of stateless persons. And in this regard, Ukraine has come a long way for the recognition of stateless persons. So it started back in 2013 when Ukraine joined the conventions and took on responsibilities concerning the recognition of stateless persons. After that, there were several attempts to regulate this issue on the national level, and thanks to the people's deputies, finally the law of Ukraine was passed to introduce certain changes to certain laws of Ukraine concerning the recognition of stateless persons. So a special procedure was developed to implement that. Also, some changes were introduced into the procedure for the provision of immigration permit. And also, since after this law has been adopted, for the first time, the right to get this ID of a stateless person was obtained by persons who are staying in Ukraine temporarily, and also we introduced such IDs with a digital information storage. So we currently do not know the exact number of stateless persons in Ukraine. It is estimated that there are between 30 and 40,000 of them. And as we have heard, the more exact data will be obtained through the national census, but also the previous assessments by government institutions and the State Migration Service. They were quite objective, and we can see from the picture we are observing right now, from the numbers of people contacting the State Migration Service, we can see this population group that requires such recognition. So these were the citizens of the former Soviet republics who have lost their documents. Also, the persons who came to Ukraine as children. Once they achieved their maturity, they could not obtain the proper document. Some people lost their citizenship because they were not registered with the consuls of their countries, and also the Roma people. So these are the persons contacting the State Migration Service for recognition as stateless persons. The first application was submitted to us this year on the 7th of May.
We've adopted 559 applications from the people who think that they are stateless and they want to be ascribed the status officially. The leaders, in terms of the applications accepted as predicted before, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Mykolaiv provinces, oblasts of Ukraine, and the city of Kiev and the province of Kiev, oblast of Kiev. And as of now, at the State Migration Service main department, there are 269 cases that are being dealt with, and the applicants of which have gone through the preliminary procedure on the level of the territorial branches and the territorial branches of the State Migration Service of Ukraine. Unfortunately, we haven't adopted a positive decision to ascribe the person the stateless status to, but we are ready to make those decisions. And as of now, for the for the report, now they have been prepared 8 cases of the kind to be given to the and soon these people will be ascribed the stateless status. And I can also inform you that in the process of dwelling on this applications, 12 people probably belong to the citizenship of Ukraine, the Ukrainian citizens, and currently we're checking if it's right or not. And with regards of the rest of the people, procedures are still being exercised. I'm talking about the check-in procedures, but in the term defined by the legislation, the respective decisions will be made. And I would also like to briefly inform you on the problematic issues that we've been facing while dealing with the applications done by the people who would like to be regarded as stateless people. I would like to stress the assistance that we've been given by the law enforcement agencies and the UNHCR office in Ukraine with regard to the translation of the translation services and legal assistance to these people who need to be defined as stateless people. But unfortunately, the embassies of the countries of their previous domicile or of the countries of their previous citizenship do not reply to our requests, and sometimes it does happen that we run into not being able to prove that the applicant has got a citizenship of the country he used to live before. And we have some problems with the Russian Federation embassy. There are lots of applicants who used to live or there is enough proof to think that they used to be the citizens of the Russian Federation. We send requests to the embassy of the Russian Federation, but they do reply to our requests, but according to the legislation, that of the Russian Federation, it says that the applicants in person have got to contact the embassy. But what's difficult is that this procedure of the SDP is not free of charge. They have to pay for it. And most of our applicants are people who do not have money to go to the embassy and to pay that the sums for the stateless determination procedure happen. For us, this seemed to be not a lot of money, but 1900 hryvnias is the cost of the procedure of the certificates for non-belonging to citizenship of the Russian Federation. And I would like, if possible, I'd like to ask the UNHCR representative office and law enforcement agencies, please think of how we can provide assistance to the former citizens of the Russian Federation to go through that procedure. Probably we can do it by means of finding fundings to give them to pay for the fees that they have to pay at the embassy. So we need that financial assistance to be given to those people. And this has got to do with regards of those who used to live in Uzbekistan, and the procedure is more expensive, which is about 4,000 hryvnias. And unfortunately, this population does not have enough money, and they cannot pay for that. They cannot pay that money for this procedure. So, if possible, that you hear me now, all of you, please think if it's possible to provide financial assistance, this type of financial assistance, to these people. And that's all that I wanted to say. And I've also I'm recalling that the organizers have sent me questions from the participants of the webinar, and the question was, there was a question that I haven't answered yet. How will the State Migration Service, how do we gather information on this stateless people? We, meaning the State Migration Service, we gather this statistic information only with regards to those stateless people, probable stateless people who contact us to define their status as stateless. So this information is gathered automatically because we use our special informational system to collect all the applications. Then this all information is aggregated, so we can get any statistic information with regards of those people who've contacted us for the SDP. And definitely we gather statistic information with regards of those people who have been defined as stateless people by some other countries, and who have documents, who've got the permanent residence permit, or who are eligible to leave Ukraine to go abroad. If you've got more questions in the process of the discussion, please feel free to ask me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Olga, for this in-depth presentation of yours. You've provided us with lots of interesting and important information with regards of your asking us and our partners. I would like to assure you that not only the participants in the Zoom have heard you, we're also streaming everything live on the Facebook. So everybody watching us on Facebook, those who are watching us have heard you as well. And in addition to that, this meeting is being recorded in 2 languages, Ukrainian and English, which later on will be posted on the YouTube, so even more people will be able to listen to and to hear what you've been saying. And we hope that we will have some feedback, and some charitable organization participating in the work in this field will also join us and help us, and will contact you. Thank you very much for having provided your question, because according to our practice, we give all those who've registered with us are given a chance to ask the question, and the State Migration Service has gotten 2 questions, and thank you very much for having answered those questions. And let's go on, and now it's a great pleasure of mine to invite to the microphone to Dmitro Plechko, and he's going to share us with his Dmitro Plechko, Assistant Legal Officer, UNHCR, representation in Ukraine, identification, protection, and prevention of statelessness. It's known that you, along with the partners, have conducted a lot of work to determining and defining and providing assistance. And we are waiting eagerly to hear about the best practices in the field. So the mic is yours. Thank you very much, Olen. It's a great pleasure of mine that this is a sunny day that we're having in Kyiv, and we're all are discussing the issues that are on our mind and that are on the mind of those people who we are discussing. I'm talking about the stateless people, the people with undefined citizenship. And I'd like to say that this is our 4th year that we with the partners have been doing this, although in the 1990s, we have some experience at our representative office. We have some experience working in the Autonomous Republic of the Crimea. We helped those Crimean Tatars who had returned to Crimea, more than 100,000 people, and they got the Ukrainian citizenship with our assistance. They got documents and the passports of the citizens of Ukraine. And with regards of the work that we've been doing over the recent 4 years, then definitely we've run into something that we've been discussed today again and again from early this morning, that we do need the data, and our data is slightly outdated because the data of the census that we have in our hands are 20 years old, and 82,000 people proclaimed that they were stateless. 40,000 people didn't state that they belong to any state, and as of now, this data has got to be updated. And that's why our representative office, having assessed the number of the people who may still be staying in Ukraine, we roughly have a figure of 35,000 people, though definitely these are the stateless people and both the people with undefined citizenship. And I would also like to say that this figure 35,000 is not the final one, because we're trying to conduct along with the state institutions, with our partners, we're trying to introduce the new techniques to make these figures correct and up to date. And on one hand, I would like to say that we're being inspired by the certain figure by the World Bank, because the World Bank in all the countries of the world is conducting the respective analysis, having interviews with the local population in the context of Ukraine. This was in the provinces, with the exception of the occupied Crimean and the Lugansk and Donetsk non-government control area. People were asked if they have documents, if they have banking accounts, if they have any other documents. And from the answer that they got in Ukraine, we see the number of the Ukrainian citizens they think to have no passport at all. As of the 1st of March 2020 was 1 million of people. So that's why I haven't checked this figure. We have made we've done what Mr. Rigel has spoken about today. We're talking about the children who were born in Donbas region, the non-government control area of the Donbas, and from the open sources accessible on the websites of these de facto state administration authorities. So over the period of these 8 years, starting with 2015, 69,423 child have not been given the birth certificate of Ukraine because of the court procedure. You need to cross the touch line, and definitely the additional burdens is put on the shoulders of the parents, and some of those parents these are the problems for the parents. And you know that from time to time the entry exit points are being shut down, and what else happens is that sometimes the children who are 14 years of age now, they cannot always get the passport of the citizen of Ukraine, because again, you need the passports present the passports of the parents. You need the documents with the picture. And we see that the most recent ombudsman paid attention in September of this year to the fact that at the entry exit point of Olenivka, de facto authorities of Donetsk Oblast wouldn't let the people from the buses with children from the non-governmental controlled organization who wanted to pass the school exams, but since they didn't have the IDs, they wouldn't be let out to pass the Ukrainian exam at high school. So we need to see we need to figure out the possible number of people who were born over these 8 years and who are currently 14 years of age, because if they're not given the respective birth certificate of Ukraine or the passport of Ukraine, these children are risking of considered to be non-stateless. Going back to the data provided by the World Bank, I would like to express my gratitude to the Minister of Justice of Ukraine, because we contacted them with a request, and we've made, as you see on the screen, a summarization of the information. So these are the figures that the Migration Service rep has spoken about. We see that in Ukraine there are stateless people legally, 5,000 of them, and you see the provinces where the number is the largest, starting with Donetsk and going down to Khersonsk Oblast. We see the resident permits being issued from the State Migration Service, and we see the citizenship granted to these people. And we see that over the 2017 to 2020, 11,000 people got Ukrainian citizenship. 1,100 people got Ukrainian citizenship, which is a big contribution, because on one hand, Ukraine has got some positive dynamics for the stateless people, because over the period of 3 years, according to the law of Ukraine, the people with the stateless people, not 5 years, just like in other countries, in a matter of 3 years, stateless people can turn to the authorities to be granted Ukrainian citizenship. And here we see that there are some results to that. And at the same time, looking at the data of the Ministry of Justice of Ukraine, we've asked about the number of children born over the 30 years of independence in the territory of Ukraine. In their birth certificates have the respective in the line mother and father. blank spaces right next to the citizenship of the parents. And this is the data that you see on the screen. And over the period of these 30 years, 1,600,000 registry entries on the births of children. So the citizenship of both parents are absent. So for us, this is an important bell ringing, so to say. This is a warning that if you add these parents to the number of those people, we're talking about roughly about 4 million people who may have the passport of the former Soviet Union, bearers of the passport of the former Soviet Union, and so they need to be assisted either to prove that they're citizens of Ukraine, or if they are stateless people, they've got to go through the procedure that Ms. Valetenko has been talking about. So this procedure is the tool that will definitely help those people get the residence permit and in the future citizenship of Ukraine, passport of Ukraine. And at the same time, you see that the stateless people are some of the stateless people are in the penitentiary system facilities. And again, there are some difficulties here because at these very places there are convicts who have no passports of Ukraine, about 11,000 as of 2020. Out of them, 1,800 say they've never been issued those passports or they've lost those passports of Ukraine. And again, we see that this statistics is not exact and 100% accurate, and we see that on one hand that on the State Migration Service website you can find information about each year from 2014 to 2021. 1,193 people have actually been granted the citizenship of Ukraine. So they used to have used to be bearers of the passport of Ukraine, but then they turned to the court, and then it was ruled by the court that they lived in Ukraine in 1991. But it's not an easy thing because you need to have witnesses who know those people for 30 years, and the lawyer should work and do their job and send in the requests and getting the answers and providing the evidence and collect all the evidence and court proceedings and everything. When we see that 424 people were actually had the inscription citizens of Ukraine, then passports, and the State Migration Service haven't run the verification process, they figured out that those are the citizens of Ukraine, and the people were issued the passports of the citizens of Ukraine. But as of now, we need more data from the Ministry of the Internal Affairs, and again, we need information from the State Migration Service about certain categories. So about the stateless people. Since 1991 on, the Ministry of Internal Affairs was responsible for that until 2012, and we don't have all the information from the State Migration Service from 2012 to 2016, and would also like to have some similar data to be given to us in between 2012 to 2013 with regards of the citizenship of Ukraine, granting of the citizenship of Ukraine, because we don't have that information on the website of the State Migration Service of Ukraine. So if we take a look at this slide and take a look, so these are the categories that of people that we've worked over the period of 4 years with working with our colleagues. So those are the two categories. So those are either regular or irregular stateless people. On this poster, you can see the type of way outs that we are offering to them and the legal assistance that they may have in order to get all the necessary documentations, and we can even pay for that. And we're also doing some work with regard to the people of undetermined citizenship. Those are the migrants from the former Soviet Union who up until today we found, over the period of 4 years, we found 400 people. Only 99 of them have gone through the court proceedings, and they were granted the passport of the citizens of Ukraine. So this is the category of people who are older than 18. They have no birth certificate, they have no passport, or they have none of those documents mentioned above. And this means that this is yet another complicated thing, making things more tough, more complicated for them, because the legislation of Ukraine will not, the legislation doesn't help them without the assistance of the lawyers. So it's only underage people on behalf of who the parents may act. Their parents cannot act on their behalf in case they are 18 plus, and sometimes parents under certain circumstances are violating the laws of Ukraine. And if we take a look at the birth rate, we see that under age of 1, you need an application, medical certificate, and the passport of the applicant. And if it's 1 plus,
for those older than 1 year old, there should be a medical certificate from the hospital and also the certificate from the place of residence. But we know from our work with Roma people that many of them do not have any registered residence address, and many of their children are not registered with the local hospitals. So for them to fulfill these conditions in Zakarpattia Oblast, for instance, it's very complicated. So if the person is 16 years old or older, the only way is to do it through the court. And if, again, if the parents are poor, if we see that they do not have money for the lawyer and for the court fees, we do attempt to support them in this regard. So here we have a photo of a person who is getting their first birth certificate, who is 26 years old. Another Roma person is 32 years old, and he has got his first document. So these are the risks for these people. They had to have their birth certificate since they were 1 month old or 1 year old, but the parents did not take care of that timely. Maybe the parents themselves were undocumented. So it's something for the government to look into, to understand how many people of this kind we have here in Ukraine. And the World Bank says the number can be up to 1 million people. So we have to find out more precisely how many of such people we have. Maybe we could exempt them from some of the court fees or provide some free legal assistance, because only if such a person gets the refusal to get the apartheid status, only then they can have access to free legal aid. Otherwise, people cannot get this free legal aid because they need to have a passport, they need to have a taxpayer number, and they do not have these documents, so they cannot solve their issues with the status. So not everyone has a status of the citizen of Ukraine. Not all of those stamps are recognized by the State Migration Service. So we can regulate that if you work hard. We were able to find about 3,000 people. We even had some precedents where the Ukrainian courts made rulings about people born in Georgia and Moldova, the part of it which is an unrecognized republic. So such court rulings were based on the testimonies of the parents, and we are very grateful for this effort. We are grateful to the Ministry of Justice and that these people are finally documented. We are also grateful for the following of Minsk Convention on Legal Aid. We are getting copies of these birth certificates. It takes sometimes a month, sometimes more to get them, because each country has its own set of bureaucratic procedures. Sometimes we are contacted by persons who claim to be stateless persons, but it turns out that they are citizens of another state. So also it is often required by the consulates that the persons arrive in person. And again, it's especially challenging in the times of COVID-19. People cannot be vaccinated without a document, and they don't have a document. So for us and for our partners, that's kind of a superhero work. So here you can see the 6 regions where we discovered 3,000 people over 4 years, and you can see that only half of them were documented over this time because
народження триває рік, а ось щодо
that takes about a year to
8 місяців, особливо коли кожне рішення на користь заявника
оскаржується. The procedure that takes 28 months. Again, even if we win in the majority of such cases, it's still a huge challenge, and we can see that it's a huge challenge for those people to go to courts for 3 years without any document. Maybe they could receive some temporary documents so that the burden is, at least in part, relieved. So here are some people who were documented. You can see the regions they are from: Kyiv, Zaporizhia, Zakarpattia, Odessa. They are poor people. They do not have anyone to support them in this, and we can see how joyful a person can be once they finally get their first certificate of their application, but quite soon they will get some temporary ID. And there are some recommendations concerning the census, taken into account the challenges we have. Census is a perfect opportunity to collect data on the stateless persons, or also persons who do not have any defined citizenship. So we would like to include this question into the agenda. And for instance, the availability of birth certificate, the passport. If, for instance, it was mentioned that a person does not have a passport or has never had one, if the person is answering such questions, maybe there is some good practice in the pilot. In 2015, when Roma people themselves were used as the ones doing the census, it's simpler for understand for the Roma people if they see that the intention is to really help them and someone is speaking their language. So we are ready to establish a working group and to develop a set of questions that could be helpful. We are ready to get the Roma people and stateless persons and persons with undefined nationality to participate in this work and to make sure we persuade everyone that it is necessary to have those questions. Thank you. Thank you, Dmitro, for this constructive. Let me also use this opportunity to congratulate you on these success cases. I wish that you have even more of them. You have provided some recommendations for the census, and I also see some questions on Facebook that are related to that. The questions about the identification of persons without citizenship. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Exactly. The persons, the stateless persons are identified, and maybe also could you please give us some feedback on the recommendations provided? Hello, dear colleagues. So sorry that I will be very brief, and I will have to leave after I provide my answer to the question asked. So first, I'm grateful to Metro, who has made this presentation and has pointed out the importance of broadening the scope that has been defined for the questionnaire. By the way, the program for the census includes a question about
він може обрати одну з відповідей, що він є громадянином України.
Say, I am a citizen of Ukraine, I'm a citizen of another country, and also I'm a stateless person. So the proposal that we have heard was to include onto this list also one more option, the option about undefined condition. A person is not sure whether they are a citizen or they are not. So we took on this task to include this additional line.
Мене як статистика не може не турбувати якість даних.
The fact that the quality of data is of much concern, especially for me as someone working in the field of statistics. So we are in our census are not using any documentary proofs of the words we hear. We are only recording what we hear from the person. So we could hear here today that it takes a lot of effort to actually find out if someone is a stateless person. And it was discussed here that it's very important to find this out. So I have huge doubts about our ability to get the large scope of reliable data, but surely we should include this option onto the list of the different answers to the question, but I'm sure that many people will not even know what is the right answer in this case. For instance, we have heard today about elderly people who are still using their Soviet time passports.
Навіть не зрозуміє сутності питання.
Will not even understand the essence of the question we ask. These are the elderly people who sometimes don't understand whether
без громадянства.
Whether they aren't, whether they are stateless.
Що ви знаєте, чи маєте ви паспорт? Ну, ви вибачте за такий, можливо, утрирую, але від ми повинні розуміти, що...
Understandable, but we need to understand that the person needs to be able to answer the question. It's not the person involved in the census who is asking the question. By the way, we plan to have to hold 2 rounds of the census where each
На сайті. Другий – це так зване door-to-door інтерв'ю, або
there is a component of the door-to-door interview whereby persons will be physically approached to each household, knocking on each door, and of course people living in those households can be different, and we do not have any right to define anything or to verify anything. We are only entitled to assist persons in understanding the questions in the questionnaire. The questions about education, about the origin, about the language, about the citizenship. And the risk is huge that people will not always be available to answer the questions correctly. Because once again, we are using just the words we hear without any documentary support. And if we understand the importance of this issue, the importance of counting the stateless persons, we need to include in the census program the question or the option of the answer about being unsure, about having a citizenship. And if the person is not able to say whether they are a citizen, yes, we will add this option, but we need to understand that the quality of data collected in such a way is not always perfect. So I'm ready to answer any other questions. Thank you, Igor. Well, maybe anyone would like to respond here immediately, Mr. Dmitro or any other panelist. If you permit, I can only give the example of Kazakhstan. Started their popular census, and our agency worked with their government agencies. They had a 3-day training for the persons recruited for the census. They made even educational videos on how exactly to ask the questions. So maybe we could discuss with you in more detail on how to ask those questions correctly and how to make sure that we can get the most objective objective data that people can provide. Thank you. Thank you, Dmitro. We surely are working together and will be working together in the future. It may happen that we train people very well, but it's the person we visit who gives the answer. So the only chance is to train everyone also to give the right answers. And we need to understand that it's not really possible if a person is well dressed and if the person has an ID of someone working for the census, so there is always some. It's a sensitive question. We are not always sure whether the person will give us the right answer. We are not checking any documents in this case. Of course, we need to train those involved in the census. Of course, we will use this opportunity. But the actual issue, we need to work broader. Maybe some educational campaign. Maybe some explanations need to be provided to persons explaining what a stateless person is. Of course, we will train those who we recruit. I'm sure we will deal with that. But how do we explain this to the general public? And it's not always good to have many options. That is the issue. But once again, I'm emphasizing that we took on the decision to include this option of undefined citizenship. Any other question? Thank you, Igor. Thank you, Dmitro. And dear participants, I will remind you that there is opportunity to ask questions in the in the comments of our of the government institutions. Right now, let's hear from Sofia, the manager of the hear about their methodology of working with stateless persons. I hope you can see my screen already. And here are my slides. Yes, we can see them perfectly. So thank you for inviting me. I represent the project of providing legal aid in
2017 року за фінансуванням УВКБ ООН на виконання глобальної цілі ООН
funded by UNHCR in order to implement a global goal of UN, and we cover a number of oblasts in the east of Ukraine. We provide legal aid concerning the establishment of citizenship whenever it's possible, and also about defining the status of stateless person. But we cannot speak of complete eradication of this fact of having stateless persons. So in order to understand the qualitative and quantitative indicators, in the end of the previous year and in early 2021 as well, we attempted to do the monitoring in the 20 kilometers proximity zone along the demarcation line, and we made some conclusions, which are some lessons that we are ready to share. So over the 4 years of our work, we realized that the main source of information concerning stateless persons are the local authorities, the hospitals. Over the 4 years of the project, there are some technical challenges with the sound. Maybe there is something near the microphone. So, so we have realized that there are several hundred people who can be, 1,300 people who could be stateless persons, and 800 of them were directed to different authorities and institutions. So about 60% of those who contact us for legal aid, they are referred to us by the local activists local institutions. So in our monitoring, we used the guidance of this information. We started from hearing from the heads, the secretaries of the territorial communities and also the hospitals, and we asked the question whether they know any undocumented persons, and they also provided the explanation of what a person who is undocumented is, or who is a stateless person, etc. So once our monitors have contacted such informants, that they found out about certain number of persons, and also the question asked was whether they know any other undocumented persons. So the intention was to measure both the quantitative and qualitative indicators in order to understand what is happening. And one of the questions we were interested in was the availability of passport. As you can see, 52% of those people only had the passport of the Soviet Union Republic. They could not exchange it, and also
16% опитаних осіб отримували
of any country, and also some people received this passport at the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. So because of the lack of access to the archives, such confirm their belonging to the citizenship of Ukraine, unless they do not have some. So there are some persons who are not of mature legal age, and sometimes so when their parents are in the temporarily occupied territories, they sometimes also cannot travel to persons who have lost their passport, or their passport has expired, and sometimes for different reasons, for instance, unavailability of funds, they do not have a current passport document, and they thus cannot confirm their citizenship. So those persons can be seen as persons without a clear citizenship status, and until it is clearly verified that they are stateless persons, or until they prove that they are citizens of Ukraine or of any other state. So what is the reason of complexities in finding out about the status of such persons? So
Тобто в них немає підтвердження навіть того, що вони були громадянами.
Who got the passports of the Soviet Union have lost the passport already. Half of those also obtain those passports in the temporarily occupied territories, which leaves no possibility to get.
Такі архіви є. Якщо це не підконтрольна територія, то
even if the archives are still available. Well, in the government control areas, we can at least try to access the archives, and maybe the information is available. Also, as I have mentioned before, 60% of the respondents had the passport of a Ukrainian citizen, but they have lost it, and the passport
І 15% від 14
territories, which creates difficulties with
що вони не можуть отримати паспорт вперше через те, що
percent of people aged over 14 years old had difficulties because their parents did not have a passport. So what are the complex
у нас немає на місцях навіть
undocumented persons?
Recording in progress.
Осіб без громадянства не ведеться на місцях. Частково обмежену інформацію щодо недокументованих осіб володіють органи соціального захисту, Центр соціальних служб для сім'ї, дітей та молоді, а також органи місцевого самоврядування, місцевої самоорганізації.
Recording in progress.
Осіб без громадянства перебуває в місцях позбавлення волі та ПТПІ. Звісно, до моменту визнання людини особою без громадянства, офіційного визнання, така особа в Україні вважається недокументованою та на рівні розглядається як іноземець. Проте, як нам здається, збір даних щодо осіб з невизначеним громадянством у цих закладах є також можливим і доречним. Дякую.
Facilities is right thing to do. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Thank you very much, Sophia, and greetings to your project. You've given us very interesting information, and from what you've given us, provided us with the advocative measures do bear fruit, and we've got to reinforce those. We've got to get together, engage in more stakeholders to overcome this low awareness, and so that everyone clearly perceives and understands and be on the same page with regards to certain phenomena that we're currently discussing. Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure of mine that I would like to give the microphone to more speakers. We've spoken a lot about the stateless people and how to deal with the problems that those people have. We've spoken about what there's going on in the world, what there's going on in Ukraine. We've spoken about the problem from the point of view of different stakeholders. Currently, we will discuss a very important set of tools. We will discuss about SCORE 2021 and the results of this, and we will
групами в Україні. І я з радістю запрошую презентувати результати роботи, а також сформувати наше бачення з даного питання.
On the matter to Darina Solodova,
аналізу даних про ООН Україна, та пана Антона Тишковського.
And Anton Tishkovsky, I'm an innovation specialist with the UNDP Ukraine, and meanwhile, our colleagues will be delivering their speeches.
Даної презентації починається сесія обговорень, питання-відповіді. Будь ласка, пані Дарино, пане Антоне, вам слово.
The stand is yours. I will be presenting. Anton is online with us. He will join us in case if he's able. Today, I will tell you about unfortunately, over the period of 2016, so we've got several waves and we can benchmark.
Пані Дарино, мені здається, що у вас щось зі зв'язком, можливо,
with the internet connection. Please switch off your camera and then the connectivity will improve.
Чи можливо перезавантажувати?
You're being interrupted. Shall you reload your computer or shall you reconnect to the internet? Do you hear me well now? Do you hear me better now? Yes, we hear you better now. If there are no interruptions.
Ми вас не чуємо.
Це партнерський проект, він фінансується.
Пані Дарина, на жаль, ми вас не
чуємо. Darina, unfortunately, we don't hear you.
Дайте мені хвилинку, може я мобільний інтернет.
Так, будь ласка. Тоді я поки що надам відповідь на запитання. Доброго дня. Чи можливо буде отримати презентацію?
Дякую. Possible to get the presentation.
Заходу ми надішлемо посилання.
The event is over. We will send you the link to a Google folder containing all the presentations of this very webinar. And in addition to that,
ви матимете
video recorded, and later on you will have a chance to rewatch it on the Facebook page in both English and Ukrainian. So, Darina, let me try and you tell me if everything's...
Партнерський проект SCORE фінансується USAID та UNDP та European
USAID and UNDP and the European Union and realized by the SEED, which is the Center of Sustainability.
Автором методології. Цього року SCORE має близько 19 тисяч інтерв'ю, тому ми маємо робити розрізи як на національному, так і на регіональному рівнях. Ми хочемо зробити в цьому році на безпеці здоров'я, на підтримки вакцинування.
Of the health and supporting of the vaccination and the national dialogue, social cohesion and public activity. And it's important to understand that the information we got was in between January and May of 2021, and we have a website that I've added, and when you
трохи більше про самовибірку, це 19
a little bit about the samples. These are 90,000 interviews.
за все, це збільшена вибірка на Донецьку.
And that's the enlarged sampling for Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast promises because we have special focus on the east of the country.
На непідконтрольних територіях. Та це ряд додаткових,
There's a set of
які ми додаємо, коли маємо якісь
whenever
і нам нужна додаткова інформація, ми чи партнери. Тому ми маємо додаткові
partners, that's
з людьми з інвалідністю, з молоддю, з учнями. Ми маємо
disabled people, young people, students, and we also have the geographical sampling. People living at the Azovsky shore. There are 18 towns of Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, so that we be able to cooperate with the towns. Do you hear me well?
Ура!
Yes, we hear you well. Hooray! Now, since our index is called the social cohesion one and social cohesion reconciliation index, we are stressing on the social cohesion, so we should answer.
Ми не можемо запитати людей просто, чи ви соціально згуртовані, тому нам була потрібна концептуальна модель. Цю концептуальну модель ви наразі бачите на екрані.
You see currently on the screen, we developed it along with the seed team for the SCORE project in Ukraine for each and every country.
Для України ми розробили таку модель.
We've developed this the social cohesion has got two aspects, the vertical aspect and the horizontal aspect. And vertical aspects are the relations with the authority and the feeling of being safe. These are all the relations of yours that link you with the authority, and you know, if you feel safe within the country with this authority. Horizontal is the relations between the citizen, everything that links you with the people living on the same street.
Іншим регіонам, іншою. Всі ваші відносини з людьми.
Relations with the people within the country. So to measure these two aspects, we developed a set of indicators, or indicators, which you currently are seeing on your screen. And for the vertical aspect, we have all
особиста, економічна, політична, екологічна, безпека здоров'я. Ми маємо довіру до різних інституцій, будь-то президент або Верховна Рада, або суди, поліція. Це оцінка надання державних, це підзвітність органів влади, оцінка рівню корупції, якість інфраструктури.
Corruption, the quality of the infrastructure, the feeling that the Ukrainian authority does care for the Ukrainian people, which is a more psychological indicator, without any particular, things, only feelings and sensations. Speaking about the horizontal, we have social tolerance, which is an ability of people to coexist with other people.
Це активна громадянська позиція, наскільки ти
proactive public point of view stance, if you're willing to do something for the people under the circumstances.
Громадянський активізм, співпраця в громаді, гендерні стереотипи, віроохиловість громадян, вимірювання маргіналізації.
The ability of citizens to change things, marginalization, because of being of certain gender, age, or any other, and relations in between different groups. So today we speak about
ми вирішили,
each and every the indicator of the
між групами та на соціальній толерантності.
Groups and social tolerance, because this shows us if we're willing, if we're ready to coexist with other people, if we're open for the dialogue, if we are able to see the compromise, if we see the common good, we and the other people, so relations in between different groups of people. Several years ago, we ran several focus groups, and we had a set of validations and discussions, and
ми зробили такий список груп, до які нам назвали люди. Ці групи, вони нічого не означають, крім того, що
nothing but the fact that these groups
або якісь емоції, або якесь ставлення, або може якісь стереотипи. Це, як ви бачите, групи і географічні, і політичні.
Those are geographical and political groups, and more philosophical groups like Ukrainian nationalists. So we're not defining those. People decided who they want to consider to be Ukrainian nationalists, but this is groups were conducted in the east or in the west, in towns or in small villages, So for this list, we would measure how often people contact with these groups of people and if they're willing to die.
If
they feel threatened by this.
до цих людей. Під соціальною близькістю ми мали на увазі, чи...
When I say socially close, meaning if they were willing to cooperate with those people, groups like colleagues, or have them as close friends, or not, you know. And I would like to give an example, how this works with one of the groups. So that the internally displaced people, the IDPs, this is the map of Ukraine of 2021. See that the IDPs most contacted with in Lugansk and Donetsk Oblast and the touchline territory. Other oblasts, provinces have no practical relations with the IDPs. Probably they have some notion of who the IDPs are, but
Це бали від 0 до 10, тобто ви бачите, що...
And you see are the points, and for the national denominator it's 1.7, for Donetsk Oblast, Lugansk Oblast 3.6, 3.4. So
це стандартизована шкала скор, це не відсоток.
Standardized score.
Прошу вас зауважити на це. І дивіться, коли ми бачимо соціальну близькість, чи ви готові працювати, чи бути
willing to work or be friends with them,
Донецької та Луганської областей та для лінії зіткнення.
For the touchline zone, and we see that figures are slightly slower for other parts of Ukraine. We have a hypothesis that
контакт напряму впливає на діалог, на можливість діалогу, на соціальну близькість.
To be socially proximate, close.
Реальний контакт дає тобі реальні, можливо, лишає тебе стереотипів та дає тобі якісь реальні...
You know, lets you get rid of the stereotypes and let you know who the people are, and thus you're much more willing to, you know, be on the same page with those people, and this social threat the same.
Бачимо доволі низькі показники Донецької
області. The figures are quite low in Donetsk and Lugansk.
Бачимо трохи вищі показники для інших областей. Всі ці карти...
All these maps are available on the website, and you actually
або будь-який інший показник з 200 нашого проєкту та порівняти те, що ви вважаєте за потрібне порівняти.
Compare what you think has got to be compared from your point of view, and also have a chance to zoom on.
Як ви бачите, тут картинка теж сама.
The picture is the same. If, for example, Melitopol, people don't have any chance to
контакти з ВПО дуже низькі.
So the willingness to dialogue with the IDP is low. If in Marinka, for example, 5.8 out of 10 means that they're willing to have a dialogue 6 to 7 up to 10, you see.
Контакт дає нам більш високу до діалогу. Якщо ми беремо усі ці групи, не тільки ВПО, які ви бачили,
not only the IDPs that you've seen in the previous slides, but other groups as well from our project, we see that the contact dialogue
я тут відсортувала по контакту.
Figures I can't sort them out. People contact from the pro-European orientation, those lives
контактів з жителями непідконтрольних територій та жителями Криму. Як ви бачите,
Crimean Peninsula.
Цих двох груп, але і готовність до діалогу низька. Відчуття соціальної загрози вище.
Of social threat is higher, and the social proximity is also lower compared with people of the other groups and the groups that are currently at the very top of the list.
Діалогу порівняно та високу соціальну близькість. Теж
and the social proximity is higher, and we all through this list we see that there's the link of the in between the contact and some other scales that we have, and we use the scale.
Що на що впливає, що ми можемо.
What impacts what? Which phenomena impacts what?
Нашу модель готовності до діалогу, для прикладу, сині.
In the blue lines are the direct links, and the red lines are the feedback, meaning if you can exercise your civil rights, it increases the dialogue, and the social threat reduces. Social threat, as you see in the previous slides,
одна з міжгрупових наших шкал. Та негативні
стереотипи. And negative stereotypes reduce the willingness to be conducting the dialogue. So you see that this is the regressive link, the regressive connection, and we see that definitely the willingness to conduct the dialogue is impacted by the social threat and the negative sides. And we also see another indicator which is called the social tolerance, with SCORE, and this is how we measure it. We ask the following question: what do you think about the following group of people? Would you like to? I'd like to contact with them personally. I would like to include them into the site, but I don't want to be staying in touch with them. I don't want to be.
Це трохи інший список, ніж ми мали.
The different list we want.
Це іммігранти, євреї, люди з іншим кольором шкіри, мусульмани, роми, ЛГБТІ-спільнота та наркозалежні. Це національний показник. Усі ці найбільш люди соціально до іммігрантів та євреїв, найнижчу соціальну толерантність вони мають для
the Jews and the least tolerance is with the
з кінця списку. Якщо кожен з цих показників, ми тут не бачимо більш великої різниці між чоловіками та жінками, що цікаво, нічого статистично значущого. Якщо ми візьмемо...
And if we take a look at the Roma people, we can also see them...
Бачите, що ця толерантність дуже відрізняється в залежності в деяких областях напруження дуже високе.
All provinces the tension is high, in some provinces there's no tension at all.
Бачите, Львівська, Івано-Франківська, Закарпатська – це місця більшого напруження, тоді як Схід та Південь такого напруження сильно немає. Це дуже...
Tension. So this is very important, and this does help us to understand.
В областях необхідні релевантні програми по роботі, наприклад, в даному випадку з ромами та з соціальною толерантністю.
Stances with Roma and the social tolerance.
Наостанок хочу вам показати наш сайт. Всі ці карти, вони існують на сайті.
All these maps, they exist, and this is the 2021 that's published, and this is appscore.org. And we can compare everything, and you can compare and see what is going on, and you can do it on your own. And I know that this has been brief. You won't be able to understand everything, and I will be able to answer your questions now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Darina. Thank you very much for your present.
Запитання до вас вже з'явилося. Чи є можливість включити осіб без громадянства до SCORE?
Into the SCORE.
Я думаю, що це можливо. Ми зараз
we're producing the new wave, and we will be able to have this discussion with you.
Нову анкету, новий опитувальник.
Questionnaire, and
Дякую. Відразу ж ще одне запитання від
another question from
ООН. Чи можете ви пояснити ваше розуміння,
and how this
може допомогти з даними
data, just to be sure? Well, from my understanding, how SCORE can deal with that topic, why I've chosen this very topic and the social tolerance and the intergroup relations, I think that the stateless people can actually feel low. Certain stereotypes, they may be having some problems with some other people in the society, and we can be measuring
Ми повинні знати, як вони себе почувають, тому що
how they feel, because our colleagues, everyone who've delivered speeches today, they
юридичною стороною питання це дуже важливо, це дуже практично.
This thing which is important, but we also have got to keep in mind what is going on within the society, how those who are stateless feel being part of the society or not being part of the society, and I think the number of Roma is not that many, because I know that the Roma have got problems with the documents, and we've got
ще додати саме людей без громадянства для того, щоб знати, що відбувається у суспільстві.
To know what there's going on personally with them. Thank you very much, Darino, for this exhausting answer to this question. And So while registering, our participants wrote their comments that this topic is very important. This topic is extremely important. And now we listen to the questions during the webinar. We hear some words as to how important this topic that we're currently discussing is. So we've received questions that goes to the State Migration Service of Ukraine, and we've already answered. Those questions have already been answered by Olga in her speech. Now, Christoph also answered the question, and if you'd like to find more on that, you can go to the website of the UNHCR, Facebook pages, how the identification of stateless people happened. We've spoken about the census. The head of the State Statistics Service has answered the question. Dear panelists, do you have any ideas how stateless people can be identified? Can you add something else in addition to the fact that we've listened to Ms. Sophia and she has answered the question, but do you have any other ideas? Maybe you have any other ideas. Maybe you've got some other. So how the stateless people are identified? Do you have any other points of view? Sorry. How
Вона звучить як саме проходить ідентифікація осіб без громадянства, але
identified stateless people, but since this very event is the platform for the exchange of the ideas in order to produce things and how to figure out how things may look, yes, we'd like to know, because you've got quite an interesting project and you've been the manager to the project. Probably you also have the point of view how things should be. As it's been said before, first and foremost, we've got to run the census to define the stateless people, to identify the stateless people. This can be a large project to identify those people within the country, and for that we need lots of resources from the country, and we need the international community to shape up the right questions. As it's been done before, the census or any other means of identification cannot actually prove if the person's got the documents or if the person knows who they are, if they think that they are citizens or just stateless people. For that, we need to be running a big information campaign, but we've got to help the people define if they're stateless or if they have unknown citizenship, unidentified citizenship, and we need to figure out the type of assistance the person needs. And the question may start with if you've got any documents, what documents do you have? Definitely, we need to listen to what the person says, and we also have to ask if you've been issued any documents once you've contacted the State Migration Service branch, what type of answer you got, and if you've gotten the birth certificate, just like Dmitro has said. So we need to understand and analyze the situation of each and every person. Then we will be able to understand, and we will be able to see that this person is a stateless person. I think I've answered your question. Yes, thank you very much.
Dear Natalia, are you with us? I would like to ask you a question concerning what are the mechanisms of stateless people identification.
Hi, Olena. Yes, I am with you.
Yes, please.
Can you
so
hear me
how can stateless people be identified, or what are the mechanisms? Please, it's up to you. Choose what you prefer more.
Thank you. I think, I mean, of course, the first thing to say about this is it's always important to clearly distinguish the difference between a legal identification of a stateless person or group and a statistical one. And this, the difference between those two processes and how, in other words, the legal definition of statelessness can be translated, if you like, into statistical definition, is exactly the process that we the expert group who are working on this project or on the development of these recommendations is currently grappling with. In terms of how that can be operationalized, like with many different population groups, statistical definitions necessarily require a simplification of legal concepts by the very nature of how data is collected through, relatively short questionnaires or potentially slightly longer questionnaires in the case of a survey. It's really important to always be quite clear that any statistical identification of a stateless person is a different process and must be necessitates a much simpler identification process than any legal or administrative route. Having said that, the work on data sources that we are currently developing further as part of the expert group to shape concrete recommendations for countries about how that can be operationalized in different data sources has various different branches. We're looking, as I mentioned in the presentation, at traditional data sources and data capture methods such as census, surveys, administrative data systems. But we are also, and this is where the kind of innovative technical work that is going on and no doubt needs further piloting moving forward is taking place. We're also looking at more alternative mechanisms, also looking at analytical practices such as modeling and data linking to get to better capture precisely the populations in the stateless populations and those of undetermined nationality in different countries. It's difficult for me to say exactly at this point, A, B, and C to answer your question clearly, exactly because we are in the midst of this process. We are, as I mentioned briefly, sharing the progress of the work so far with the Commission upcoming in March 2022. And based on the feedback that we receive from countries, and often the feedback we do receive from countries focuses on this question in particular, Olena: how do you actually operationalize this, and how do you actually identify these populations in our standard statistical tools? Will no doubt be something that we will benefit greatly from and can better hone the recommendations, can better refine the recommendations, and the work that will go on next year in 2022. And I should say we look very much forward to your experience in Ukraine feeding into that process, as they are, of course, moving in parallel, given the timeframes that I've learned from all of you here today. I hope I answered the question adequately, Olena, but please let me know if you'd like me to share more.
Yes, thank you very much, Natalia. Perfectly well, understandable and comprehensive as usual. Thank you very much. So now I would like to ask a question, Her Excellency Ms. Karolina Lincoln-Billing, concerning what should be done to prevent statelessness.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a different view now, so I can't see. But I think what should be done to prevent and address, one of the first things that should be done to prevent statelessness is ensuring that children who are born have their births registered, and so that they can later obtain ID documents and other types of documents, civil documentation that is required in order to prove your identity and right to access to healthcare, social services, the labor market, education, etc., throughout their lifetime. Because if we don't start with this, we create new generations of stateless or potentially stateless persons. And just remember, I mean, these children, even if they are born to parents who are stateless or parents who are undocumented, they are born as a new child. They've never, you know, chosen or had the possibility to change their situation. So it's really important that this is done from the start as a way of preventing. Then I think what we've discussed a lot today around finding different ways of identifying those who are at risk of statelessness because they didn't have their births registered or they didn't obtain documents later in life. That is really key as a way to address their situation and enable them to either claim the nationality they're entitled to or be recognized as a stateless person. And I think that we talked about, you know, the census as one excellent tool to help identify stateless or potentially stateless populations. But I think there are also many other ways that this can be done through work done by civil society organizations with marginalized populations, for example, or in the context of schools when parents come to register their children for schools, if the parents don't have documentation and their children don't have documentation, this is one place in which you can provide people with information about the legal procedures they can access. Same with healthcare. Everyone seeks healthcare or dental care at some point in their life. These are also important entry points for providing information. So first of all, like we've been doing today, increase awareness about this issue, that there are people living who are not able to prove their nationality and their belonging to a state, and the consequences of that in terms of their ability to live, you know, what we think of as a normal life with access to schools, healthcare, etc., and helping them be, you know, raising their awareness about the procedures they can access, like the statelessness determination procedure managed by the State Migration Service. I think these are just some of the things that can be done. And working together, triangulating information we have, sharing the knowledge through different channels is one important way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for such a vital vision we should all remember and keep in mind while quitting this webinar today. That's what we really should take with us in our hearts and in our thoughts. Thank you very much. I
would also like to ask a question to Dmytro and Olga. So, if you have any further comments about identification of stateless persons and what are the mechanisms of detection of such persons are available and should be available. Dmytro, are you with us, and do you have anything to share on the subject? Yes, I expected that Olga would start. Okay, on our part, I can add that we could develop some information campaign that could, once again, with support of the local territorial communities, maybe the police, which knows better about what's happening locally, and also other institutions such as social protection, such as registers, of marriage and birth and representatives of the migration service, if they are aware of any persons without the passports, without birth certificates, they should refer them to our partners, and wherever our partners are not available, they should be referred to the free legal aid. Maybe something will be delivered to them pro bono. Well, maybe they should have the statistics. So there are 5 different procedures available, because we do not know about the possible complexities. We need to have some systematic solutions, because once again, in order to get those persons exempt from the legal fees, we need to have the procedure for that. Yeah, if they do not have any income and there is a lockdown currently, I do not see any legal method how this could be done, because unfortunately we are present only in 6 regions. We have not completed our work, and even if someone has been discovered, we not always can support them. So UNHCR on its own cannot cope with the situation. There are other actors that need to be involved, and maybe the migration service that could support us in this. Maybe some temporary documents with a photo could be issued to those people. But for this purpose, the law on the migration registers had to be updated, because otherwise we will not be able to get out of this vicious circle. Olga, now, do you have any comments? I like to say that the state migration service works closely with the local authorities in order to find out about persons who are undocumented and who are residing in those communities. Also, we should not underestimate the support of the legal aid associations, because people are more willing to contact them than governmental institutions, to which they can have some distrust. And as for the information campaign, yes, indeed, people need to be aware about the availability and that aid is available. And first and foremost, people who are undocumented, they should be aware that such a procedure does exist, and that if they contact the state migration service or maybe the legal aid organizations that will help them apply to the state migration service, this should be the way forward, and as a result, they will get the document that they will use as their ID, and this will be their key to getting all the necessary services. So thank you, Olga. Dear participants, dear panelists, our time is over, and we as organizers are very grateful. So in the end of this event, I'd say in the summary that we look at the issue both internationally and globally, and nationally as well. So we considered the involvement of different stakeholders, and right now we already have some understanding. We can do some mapping of the activities that are happening. Thank you so much for your participation. Take care and have a good day. We will keep on working fruitfully at organizing platforms for exchange of opinions so that everyone can contribute to this principle of leaving no one aside. Thank you so much and goodbye.